Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? All right. All right. Well, we'll have an exciting discussion hopefully today, and that'll help out with that. So, any questions over the readings? All right. Go ahead and put your notes up. Everybody good? Okay. So, what are some of the goals and accomplishments of the National Organization for Women? Okay, equality in the workplace. Let's expand that just a smidgen. Equality how?
They get the same opportunities.
Same opportunities, equal pay. I mean, those are big things, right? All right, anything else?
Participation in society.
Okay, they want to be able to participate equally in society.
Legalize abortion.
I'm sorry.
Legalize abortion.
Legalized abortion.
Law against violence.
Okay. Laws against violence.
Equality within the marriage.
Okay. So equality within the marriage.
So like the man is not above her in her own marriage,
Yeah, responsibilities
Yeah.
and privileges.
Yeah.
Okay. And so those are some of the goals. What do they accomplish?
A lot of them.
Okay, almost, it looks like most, if not all, and there's a few that weren't accomplished, but for the most part, they accomplished most of their goals, right? All right. So what are we talking about today? Actually, I'm going to step back from it.
Minorities.
Okay, we're talking about minorities, and what about the minorities?
Their fight for like recognition.
Okay, so this is the rebellious 60s where you have lots of people who are saying, hey, wait a minute, the African Americans got civil rights, I want civil rights too. So you see women, you see Hispanics, you see gays, you see various groups of people, students, who are all saying, we want our rights as well. And a lot of times these are predicated by the civil rights that they see people, achieving. And sometimes they are predicated by, wait a minute, those privileges have not gone far enough. So we're going to start out with the students. Why would the students start rebelling? If you remember, probably 3 or 4 class periods ago, we talked about changes. And the last slide, we talked about rock and roll, right? What is different about these students? What is different about these young men and women? All right. In the 1920s, where do most young women and men work?
Factories.
Either factories or on the farm. So they don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of extra opportunities to go out and change things. Now, one of the things that did change things is the GI Bill, right? Because now there's a lot more people going to college. It's expected that you will go to college. So you have a lot more people who are attending college, and then with the Vietnam War, this ramps up again, right? So you have a group of students who say, hey, we're looking at the civil rights. We think the movement towards civil rights for African Americans is good, but it's not enough. The old people have tried and they're not getting it done. So if I believe the old people have tried and they're not getting it done, what do I need to do? All right, I'm going to take action myself. I am going to force the issue, and I'm going to force adults to do what I want them to do, right? There are various levels of, or various groups of people in this organization, or in the group of students. For the most part, these students are Democrats. Why do you think that these students are Democrats?
Probably because the Republicans didn't feel the same way that they do. They feel
All right.
that everything should be.
So the Republicans are still in this, all right, we'll move slowly, we will accomplish things as we can get there. Within the Democrats, you have all the way from communists to more, the Southern Democrats. So you have this big spread, and there's a active movement to take control of the party and move the party where the more activist people want it to go, right? So you have these students who are on campus. A lot of the faculty are Democrats, and they are saying, we need to move this direction. The students start pushing, the faculty support them. Let's walk through some of the groups. So you have the hippies. What do you know about the hippies?
They wear the flared pants. They're seen doing drugs. They were listening to different music from what was considered the norm. You'd see them out a lot at bars, at clubs, stuff like that.
Okay, so they are out for, hey, I'm just in it for fun. I'm going to, I think it was tune in and drop out. So I'm gonna do drugs, I'm gonna hang out, I'm gonna have sex and, listen to rock music. And at the end of the day, I'm just not gonna participate in society. I'm gonna do my own thing, and society, you do your own thing. What is the highlight for the hippie movement? I think everybody has heard of this.
Make love, not war.
Well, okay, that is, yeah. They are, make love, not war. So that's kind of their mantra. So have you heard of Woodstock? What is Woodstock?
Big concert.
Okay, it's a big concert, and it's kind of intriguing. It was not meant to be nearly as big as it was. It was some bands getting together, playing music, and everybody's just gonna hang out and listen to music, except that everybody told their friends. So it's like one of those house parties that you see on TV, right? Where, hey, I'm just gonna tell my 5 friends, but then they tell their 5 friends, and the next thing you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people all rolling through, right? Woodstock does the same thing. In Woodstock, they were just getting together in New York, and they were gonna play some music, and everybody's gonna hang out, except everybody hears about it, and everybody goes, wow, that sounds like a really fun, cool thing. So loads of people roll into Woodstock. Now, positive. Everybody kind of just hung out. There wasn't extreme violence there. There wasn't any big problems because people are just coming out and listening to the music. Any negatives to Woodstock? You didn't know that there were going to be so many people. People didn't bring food. They didn't bring water. There were a lot of people that started to overdose, so they had to bring nurses in. So it's not like, oh my goodness, everything's going to die. But there were some things that they were like, wow, if this ever happens again, we need to figure it out and we need to be ready. Now, what happens anytime that you have a group of hundreds of, maybe thousands of people gathering? Someone else is like, I can make money off of that, right? So the hippie movement actually has a group who says, we should do this again, not on the East Coast, but on the West Coast. And so they create Altamont. They were going to do this in a city, but the mayors of the city were like, nope, we are not going to let a bunch of hippies come in and take over our city. So they rented Altamont, which is a speedway in California, and they said, this will give us enough space that we can put bands in the center, have everybody play, everybody can hang out, we can make loads of money. Now, if you're about making money, then that changes the perspective, right? So they wanted to make sure that they had enough nursing and enough things to take care of people if they needed, but they thought we also probably should have security. Does that make sense? Now, if you want to do security cheap in California, is there any group that you could use that has a pretty good reputation for, like, they can handle things, but would probably work for beer? So it's actually the Hells Angels. So I will give you some advice, and I'm not trying to get in trouble with the Hells Angels, but if you have a big organization and you want security there, maybe don't pick the Hells Angels. So who are the Hells Angels? Am I the only old one in here? Wow.
I mean, I know of them, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what they are.
Yeah, they're a motorcycle gang, right? So you bring in a motorcycle gang to provide security. Is there any way that could go wrong? Yes, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it, right? So the Hells Angels come in. Everyone else is drinking, so the Hells Angels are drinking. everyone else is smoking pot, so the Hells Angels are smoking pot, right? There's LSD going on. So you have bikers who are drunk and some of them are high who are providing security. During this time, they decide that, hey, these people may not be doing what we need them to do, so they beat up several people. But the worst thing is in the middle of the Rolling Stones playing, there's a guy right in front of the stage named Meredith Hunter, and for some reason he pulls out a gun. Some people say it was to protect himself from the Hells Angels. Long story short, it doesn't, because the Hells Angels see a gun and they beat him to death and stab him to death, feet from the stage with the Rolling Stones playing. As you can imagine, this was kind of the end of, hey, let's have big concerts, right? No one else wants to kind of follow in the footsteps of Altamont. So the hippies are, hey, sex, drugs, rock and roll. A lot of them, why are they able to be hippies? Because their parents make enough money that they're able to drop out and do drugs. And they know that, if things get too bad, I can just go back to my parents' house, so it's not a big deal. So the hippies, even though they have Altamont, they are probably the least offensive, least violent group in this program. So the yippies, what do the books say about the yippies? They're kind of like the hippies, except they want to protest. Do they have anything that they really care about protesting? Not really. They just like to protest. Why do you think they want to protest?
Be like everybody else.
Yeah, because they want to tick people off. They see other people protesting and it really frustrates people, and they're like, you know what? This looks fun. Let's just tick people off because we can. And so they would go out and they would protest just to create difficulties for people. So the leader actually said, revolution is fun. Let's just go out and frustrate people because we can. Then you have the Students for a Democratic Society. This is a group of students. They start in Michigan, and they actually do start from seeing the civil rights movement, and they say, wow, we are watching on TV humans being treated badly by other humans for no other reason than their skin color. So we want to change that. We want to make a difference. We are going to force change because the old left wasn't able to do it. They're not accomplishing what they need to do quickly enough, so they start calling themselves the new left. They are going to force the issue. They are going to push everyone to make the changes that they want them to make. So they admit, they sit down, they write out a referendum, and they admit that we come from privileged homes, that we have money, we have the ability to go to college, and so we are going to use that to force other people to listen to what we have to say. They start out by protesting and, giving speeches. Over time, there are much more aggressive people and much more aggressive tactics used. So over time, they take over buildings in colleges and they say, you're going to accomplish what we want you to do or we'll shut the university down. At first, some of the college presidents tried to bring in the police. Over time, a lot of the colleges just backed up and said, all right, what can we do to kind of calm you down? As this happens, the SDS gets more aggressive. They turn into, there's a group that actually starts calling themselves the Weathermen, based on a song that says, hey, it doesn't, take a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing. During this time, they actually start recruiting by going into classrooms, tying up and gagging the teacher. Please don't get any ideas. And then they take over the classroom and they start giving their speeches on why students need to be part of SDS. They move from that to, I'm going to burn down buildings, I'm going to attack the police, I'm going to attack people who don't believe with me. And then they finally move into the place where they start believing that they are in a guerrilla war against their own government. And by this time, they have become fully Marxist. They basically start creating bombs, blowing up police stations, blowing up the court system, because they want to destroy America. So what starts out as, hey, we want to improve things, turns into we want to overthrow the government. Then you have the straight up Marxists who start out saying, we want to overthrow the government. And finally, you have the anarchists. So what do the anarchists believe? Yeah, we just want to overthrow the government. We don't want a government. We don't even want to replace the US government with a communist government. We just want no government. And I don't know, I was amused. I don't know if I've told you guys this. When my son went to the University of Texas, he sat there for a little bit. He called home and he said, I was really shocked. Today I saw a sign recruiting for the anarchists and they're voting for their president. He's like, I'm not sure. How does an anarchist group vote for a president? And I was like, yeah, I'm with you on that. So, all right, so you have student groups. One of the other groups is women. So Betty Friedan is kind of the face of feminist groups in the 1960s. She writes a book called The Feminist Mystique, and in The Feminist Mystique, she says women are pushed to, into the home, and that they are deadened by domesticity. Does that make sense? So what is the expectation? If you remember, I said one of my friends went into the Air Force, and as they were moving into their house, the commander's wife came in. What was the expectation? Okay, she's not supposed to work. She's supposed to stay at home. She is supposed to join the organizations that will help her husband. Her husband will go out and work. And Betty Friedan says, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. That kills our spirit, that kills our soul, and we want to fight, we want to make a change, right? So she also says magazines and advertisers forced women into utter boredom and lack of fulfillment. Now, I have to admit, I'm a little intrigued and a little questioning that, because magazines and advertisers do what? Most of the time, if you have a magazine that no one likes, what's going to happen to it?
No one's gonna read it.
No one's going to read it. No one's going to buy it. It's going to disappear. So there were women who were wanting to read this. But does that mean that all women are in agreement? No. And so she says, there is a group of us, there is many of us who are frustrated by what these magazines are selling. So I will ask you, because I get to go by and I look at the front pages of the magazine sometimes when I shop, but realistically, what do women's magazines talk about? Okay, nobody in here looks at a women's magazine? Yeah. Now,
It depends on what kind of magazine you pick up. If you pick up a sports one and talk about different sports idols in it, there's a lot of body image ones that are going around. A lot talking about idols, like the Kardashians and stuff like that.
okay, so you do have sports magazines that are for men and women, but yes, the ones that are focus directly on women tend to talk about losing weight, or look at what this icon, someone who is a actor or actress or someone else has done. Here's how to date people. Here's how to, here's what your day is going to be like, right? So she says all of that is killing me. Now, they create the National Organization for Women, and we already talked about it, but some of the things in workplace discrimination. So at the time, there were jobs that were listed, I need a man to do this. Can you do this anymore? No. There is no place where you can say, I am hiring a man to accomplish something, right? They also are frustrated by pay. And I will give you an example of that. When my wife took her first job, everybody was happy. We thought, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. She went in, she interviewed. We thought that the pay was settled. We thought everything was figured out. And when she accepted the job, her boss came out to her and said, hey, just so you know, your husband's making good money, so this is what we're going to pay you. Also, he has really good benefits, so we're not giving you benefits. Now, there was a man working in the same position, same job, and he was not told that. Is that legal? No. That is absolutely illegal now. You can't say, hey, your family member is doing better, so we're not going to pay you. So this is a change that they pushed for and they got. Anybody know what the requirements were for flight attendants at that time?
Not married.
You couldn't be married. You couldn't get pregnant. When you turned a certain age, you had to quit. Because they wanted young, attractive women who were doing this job, right? And so those laws, or those standards were overthrown by the law. They said you can't have age discrimination. You can't say that if a woman gets married, she has to quit. You can't say that if she gets pregnant, she no longer works. And intriguingly, at this time, some teaching jobs had the same standards. If you were teaching, even if you were married and you got pregnant, you were forced to quit. Because they said, you need to not be in the classroom, you need to go home and get ready for your child, and then once you have your child, if you want to come back, you can, but we would rather you not. You need to go take care of your child. So there was a lot of societal pushes, and they pushed back. All right, maternity leave rights. Do we have maternity leave rights now? Most places we do have maternity leave. So if, and especially if you work for the government, you will be able to take time off to have a child. Tax deductions, government-supported childcare. Why is this important? Anybody know what childcare costs? Yeah. So when we had our children, my wife was working, but because I kept moving every 2 to 3 years, she would get into a job, she would get promoted, and then we'd move, and she would have to start over. At one point, she said, I am paying as much in childcare as I'm making. So if you're a single parent and you're paying as much in childcare as you make, what does that mean? Yeah, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your food. All you can do is pay childcare. And so they said, wait a minute, we need to do something. So either the government help provide childcare, or let's give tax benefits. Yes, ma'am.
Why do you guys have childcare? Why do you have to pay to have a child?
So if you go to work and you need someone to take care of the child while you're at work, that you are telling me that in Iceland, obviously, childcare is free.
Kinda.
2,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go to kindergarten.
Yeah. And so here, you can put them in the daycare, but you will pay for the daycare. And so that is the concern. They said, wait a minute, this is too expensive. We can't afford this. You have to help people so that they have the ability to take care of their child. All right, unsegregated education. This is now not talking about African Americans and white people. It's talking about men and women, right? So you had men's colleges, you had women's colleges. Now, if I'm correct, there are no men's colleges, and someone told me the other day there were 13 women's colleges left. But they don't want to have segregated educations. We are weirdly starting to move back to segregated educations with some universities and in some organizations. All right, equal job training opportunities for poor women. They were just saying, hey, there are programs, there are government programs to help men who don't have jobs, who are poor, to teach them how to read, how to do jobs. We need the same kind of training for women, right? Equal Rights Amendment. This is one of the things that does not pass. So what do you think the Equal Rights Amendment says?
Gives equal rights to everybody.
Everybody has the exact same rights. Now, this is one that's kind of interesting because a lot of women liked a lot of these things, right? But Equal Rights Amendment, you actually have a lot of women who push against that. Why do you think women would push against an Equal Rights Amendment?
The draft.
The draft. Because if you get fully equal rights, then you have fully equal responsibilities. And so they said, wait a minute, we're not ready for women to be drafted into the Army or to the military. We're not ready for women to be, pushed in the same ways. And so there was a big fight over this. This actually winds up being one of the few things that the National Organization of Women wants that is not passed. All right, and then they want greater access to contraception and abortions. Does that happen? Yes. All right, we had Roe versus Wade, right, which made abortion legal throughout the entire United States, every place, every state, up through birth, right? And so this does get pushed. One of the other things that's interesting, if you remember the groups of women that push for women to be able to vote, what is their original issues? Why do they start pushing for the right to speak out? What are they initially speaking out for?
Women's suffrage.
Okay, so when they start, it's about slavery, right? And then people say, hey, shh, you need to shut. And so they are like, okay, no, I want a voice. In the same way, a lot of the women that join the National Organization for Women and other women's rights organizations start out with the SNCC, start out with other, the Black Panthers and the Chicano movement, and they are treated poorly. There are many who are in the SDS, the Student Democratic Society, and so in these groups, the leaders of the groups that are fighting for the rights of that group treat women like garbage. And they say, wait a minute, why am I in an organization that is fighting for people to be treated better, but I'm treated horribly? And so they push back and they start saying, we're going to push for women's rights. All right, I brought these out just because I want to have some perspective. Yes, these are offensive. Yes, some of them, well, I am hoping none of them would be eligible to be in a magazine today. I will admit, I think these are the more extreme ones, even from the time. But what do you see here that you think may or may not be used today?
Wait, ask that one more time.
What do you see up here that somebody would not put in like today? That it would be, no, that's not going to happen.
All of them,
Okay. I- okay.
bottom.
Okay. So, yeah, if you're not getting fresh coffee, your husband has an opportunity to spank you. I can't swear to everybody, but I am pretty confident that if I ever went home and told my wife that there was a thought in my head that I was going to spank her, it would not be a positive discussion, right? It's not appropriate. It's not going to happen, right? So, do you guys see what this one says?
You mean a woman can open it?
Yeah. What is that implying?
That they can't do everything that I can.
Yeah, the women are weak. They can't open up a bottle. And I just need somebody strong and, virile to do
They're
this.
strong too.
Yes. All right. How about the middle one?
We are not the mates.
All right. It's amazing to me that you would even consider, hey, I'm going to put my foot on a woman's head. And that's an advertisement, right? All right. Again, I'm not certain what would happen if I told my wife to serve me breakfast in bed and kneel down before me. I'm pretty confident it would not go well, right?
You would definitely get that food on your face. He would throw it at you.
I'm not even sure there would be food involved. But yeah, and then this was the one that I really am amused by. Blow smoke in her face and she'll follow you anywhere, right? I don't know.
Run away.
If you blow smoke in my face, I might punch you, right? Yeah, I can't imagine any woman being like, oh yeah, blow smoke into my face. That's going to make me attracted, right? So what would happen if I threw one of these things and I was trying to advertise for a corporation with this?
Would it go well?
Okay, it wouldn't go well. I am guessing, but I am guessing that the majority of women in this country would be like, don't ever buy from that company again, right? So it would actually flip on its head. Instead of getting you more people to buy, it would shut your company down, right? So the reason I throw this up here is I want to kind of show you guys we have gone a long way toward women's rights, right? There is no opportunity for somebody to put something like this up anymore. All right, so 1968. The Democrats are trying to determine who's going to be their presidential candidate. Is Johnson eligible to run? He's been president for 5 years, right?
Yes.
Can he run again?
Yes.
Yes, because he finished up Kennedy's term and then he's had one term. He has one more term. Now, a guy named Eugene McCarthy, and this is not the same McCarthy as in the 50s. This is kind of his alter ego, right? He starts pushing against Vietnam. We should not be in Vietnam. So who is going to support Eugene McCarthy? The students, right? And young people, because they're like, yeah, we don't want to fight. And so they go to the first conventions, and Johnson thinks he has it, right? The sitting president almost always is just pushed through. And Johnson says, I passed the Civil Rights Act. I have done all this great society stuff. I should be a shoo-in to get my second term. And instead, Eugene McCarthy comes in and he doesn't get as many votes, but he gets a lot of the delegates. And when he does this, it throws Johnson. And he's like, whoa, I am not going to be a president who runs for office again and gets beat out by his own party. The other piece of that is once Johnson kind of sees what's happening, other people start talking about running. And he says, all right. And so he just says, I'm not going to run. So he bows out. Once he bows out, his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, comes in and becomes the new nominee. So this is sort of like Nixon, when Eisenhower couldn't run anymore, Nixon rolls up. Humphrey rolls in and says, okay, Johnson's not going to run, so I will run. He is kind of the party guy that everybody says, all right, this is the next nominee. But not everybody agrees. So you have McCarthy who is running, and then you have Robert Kennedy announce that he is going to run. Who is Robert Kennedy and why do we care?
It's John F. Kennedy's brother.
John F. Kennedy's brother, who was his attorney general, and he is from the Kennedy family, right? Very influential. And what does he have going for him that the others don't? His brother was assassinated, and everybody is like, wow, Kennedy was a great guy. And so now you say, wow, Robert Kennedy, he was with John F. Kennedy, and so we should go ahead and vote for him. He goes to California. He is trying to gain votes. He gives a speech, and after the speech, he walks back to the kitchen to thank the kitchen help. Hey, I appreciate all you guys have done to make this a good dinner and a good opportunity for me. As he rolls back, there's a sound, and if you watch the video, everybody is kind of talking. You hear kind of a loud noise in the background, and then you hear screams. So Robert Kennedy is assassinated by a guy named Sirhan Sirhan. The weird part to me, Sirhan Sirhan doesn't hate Robert Kennedy. He's a Palestinian. He's angry about U.S. support for Israel. He is looking for a politician. He really doesn't even, it's not a big deal who he picks. He could have picked Richard Nixon. He could have picked anybody, but he winds up shooting Robert Kennedy. So now you have John F. Kennedy shot and Robert Kennedy shot. This creates a lot of frustration, a lot of concern in people because they're like, okay, we have to try to protect our people that are running for office. All right, now I want to flip over. All of this craziness is not just happening in the US. In Czechoslovakia, again, where's Czechoslovakia?
In Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe, under Soviet dominance, right? But the Czechs are struggling with the economy, they're struggling with the government, and they're not happy. So there are some people who say, okay, let's go ahead, we'll give them a few more rights, let's kind of calm people down and let them have some of the things they want. So they allow them to vote. They go ahead and they vote out the government. The new government that they vote in ends censorship and says, hey, you can go ahead and talk, you can do what you want. And they start reforming what they are doing in government to make life easier. Now, remember what I said before? Does this make the people happy? It should, you would think, right? But now they're like, well, I want more rights. I can express my frustrations, and all of us are frustrated. So now we want more rights. We want to have a democratic government. We want to have the ability to have a capitalist society. Can the Soviets handle this? No. If they allow the Czechs to have a more democratic society, what's going to happen throughout Eastern Europe? Everybody is going to start having revolutions. So they announce Warsaw Pact exercises. They bring the military to the border of Czechoslovakia, and then they just roll in and invade. They replace the government with a more conservative government, and they reestablish censorship and a controlled economy, and you're only allowed to go certain places at certain times. And so very restrictive so that they know that they will have control again. Now, this again offers the U.S. an opportunity to support Czechoslovakia, right? What do? Nothing. Again, the U.S. determines that it's in our best interest to not deal with Czechoslovakia. We don't want to fight the Soviet Union. We're already fighting in Vietnam. People in the U.S. are angry over Vietnam, and so they don't want to deal with that. So now they're saying, hey, we just can't help in Czechoslovakia. They turn out to be really correct. You have the 1968 Democratic Convention. The Democrats are going to meet in Chicago, and they're going to determine who are their presidential candidates, how are they moving forward, what is the platform. Now, again, the Democrats have people all the way from the southern states all the way to people who are fully communist. So how do you decide in this group of people who is going to be elected? How do you decide what your standards are going to be, what your marketing plan is going to be? So they are getting together in Chicago. They're trying to make this work. But as they get to Chicago, the people in Chicago take the opportunity and they're like, we're going to go on strike. We're not getting paid enough. Our benefits are not good enough. And so this will give us an opportunity to make our case nationally, right? Governor Daley in Chicago says, this is going to run smoothly. I'm not going to let anything hamper this and make Chicago look bad. Well, he blows it, because immediately, if your telephone operators, your taxis, and your buses are all on strike, what happens when I land at the airport? I can't call a taxi, right? I can't get on the bus. How do I get to my hotel? Oh, I can call the hotel and have them pick me up, except I can't, right? So from the beginning, this turns into a nightmare because the strikes shut down the city. In addition, there's a lot of protesters, a lot of youth that come in and they say, we are going to make our point at the Democratic National Convention. We are going to force the Democrats to listen to us and to do what we want them to do. So they try to come in, they try to break into the convention. Mayor Daley has actually put police all over the place. There are police snipers on the top of the building that are told if someone tries to break in, shoot them. So there's a lot of aggressiveness on both sides. Then, as the protesters start pushing in, the police are called and they're told, get them out of the way. So now what you see across the televisions of America are young 19 to 25-year-olds who are fighting with police, policemen who are beating up citizens of the U.S. What does this do to the perceptions of Americans? Now, if you believe that the youth are out of control, then what do you see happening here?
Bunch of police trying to put down a bunch of out of control.
All right, you see out of control kids whose parents need to take care of them and get them under control. And if their parents won't do it, then the cops need to. But if you believe that the U.S. is struggling with police violence and that these students have the right to protest and do anything they need to, what do you see?
Bunch of police doing unnecessary actions.
All right, you see the police who are beating up citizens of the United States for no reason, right? So does this help the U.S. kind of coalesce together and figure out, hey, this is where we're going to go? No, it splits us apart further, and now everybody is frustrated, everybody is angry, and they are angry from different perspectives. And you guys could probably understand this better than most of the people in the last 30 years, right? Have you guys seen this? A couple people have, a couple people are like, I'm not here. All right, so we have seen police beating up people, right? And it has divided the nation further because we're frustrated. One group says, hey, the police are abusive. One group says, well, the police are doing what they have to, and the people are not listening. So once you get into the Democratic Convention, everything's going to calm down, right? No. Instead, you actually have the demonstrations, you have problems there as well. So you actually have states who have voted in their groups of people who are going to represent them, and they get there, and just like last time, there were 2 groups from Mississippi. This time, there are 2 groups from 17 different states, right? So that's what, almost a third of the states have more than one group, or have groups that are protesting and saying, these representatives do not represent us. And so the Democratic Convention, the party has to determine who is actually going to represent each state. So they can't even move to who is going to be our nominee for president, who is going to be our nominee for vice president. They have to figure out who is representing each state and who gets to make the votes. All right? So, in the 1968 election, you have Hubert Humphrey. Now, you had McCarthy. McCarthy, for a long time, says, I'm not going to support Humphrey. I am running on my own. Then you have a guy named Wallace from the South who says Hubert Humphrey is caving into people and listening to the far left. McCarthy is the far left. We need somebody who represents the good, solid Democrats from the South. So you have 3 different groups. When Hubert Humphrey goes out to speak, students will roll in and shout him down, so he is not able to speak. So your first cancel culture, right? He is very frustrated by this. He's like, look, I want to listen to you. I want to tell you what we are doing to represent the students. But they don't care, and so they just shut him down. The other thing you start to see, which is kind of interesting, is some of these students start to say, you know what? People aren't listening to us because we have long hair and we're hippies and, we haven't done what society thinks we should. So some of Wallace's supporters actually roll in, they say, we're going to cut our hair, we're going to wear suits, and we're going to walk around and tell people about our agenda. So you have one group that's shouting people down, one group that is going out and saying, hey, we're going to represent well because we want people to understand our perspective and we don't want them to ignore us the second they see us, right? So you have all of this kind of going on. You have all of the craziness. Long story short, Wallace finally said, McCarthy finally says, hey, Hubert Humphrey and Johnson have agreed to start peace talks in Vietnam. Because they agreed to start peace talks, I'm going to pull out. I recognize that my being in this race hurts the Democratic Party, and so he pulls out and finally gives his support to Humphrey. Wallace does not. So what happens when you have a divided party? What happened when Taft and Roosevelt are fighting?
One person has to leave the party.
Okay, one person can leave the party, but who wins the vote? The other party, right? If you have divided your party, then it's almost guaranteed that the other party will win. And I know Truman kind of threw that one, but Truman's the thing that proves the rule by breaking it. So in this, what do you see? Nixon carries most of the states. Humphrey carries the Northeast and Texas. And Wallace carries a significant part of the South. Right? So, who wins the election? Nixon. All right. Now, the other piece that's really weird is Richard Nixon has nominated Spiro Agnew as his vice president. This becomes probably one of the worst vice presidential administrations that we ever have. So we will get to that later, but just be aware that turns ugly. Even with the division, Nixon still only takes 43% of the vote. So it's a lot closer than it could have been, but Nixon still wins. All right, so let's talk about some of the other people that are frustrated, that are trying to change things. So we've talked about African Americans, we've talked about women, we've talked about students. What about the Chicano movement? Who are the Chicano movement? For the most part, Hispanic workers in the Southwest, right? Why would they be concerned? What do they have to be angry about?
Their farms.
Okay, they're working on farms for the most part, right? But they're not working on their farms, they're working on other people's farms. And has anybody ever seen migrant workers? When you are a migrant worker, you will move state to state, you move with the crops. So you, as the crops are being taken care of, you go through. As the crops are being harvested, you're going through the same states, right? So how often do you spend in one location?
Not very long.
Not very long at all. In some cases, you might be able to stay in a place for a month. Now, if you think about it, so what opportunity does that give you to have a home? There's not a good opportunity to have a home. One, you don't have a lot of money, but two, you're always moving. So you can't have a home that you're not living in, right? So a lot of them, the owners of the fields will build little shacks at the end, and they will live in those shacks. Now the other problem is if you have children, and I mean everybody wants the opportunity to have children, right? Not that you need to have a child, but you want to at least be, I can if I want to. So if you have children, what happens to these children while you're moving from state to state, month by month? Where do they go to school?
Wherever you're at in that month.
All right. wherever you're at that time. Now, think about this. If you went to school for 2 weeks in one school, and then you transferred and you go to school in a different school for another 3 weeks, and then you go to a third school for another 2 weeks, and a fourth school for a month, what's your education like? Yeah, it's all over the place. Do you think you're getting a good education? No. Now, tie back to this the fact that many of these students speak Spanish as their primary language. How good is their education? Their educations are horrible, right? And so they're frustrated. And the other thing, I mean, why don't they vote and fix it? You have to have established residency to vote. And if you are continuously moving, then how do you establish your residency, right? So they're frustrated and they're saying, we're not paid enough, we're not taken care of enough, our students have poor educations, we want to have the opportunity to better ourselves and to improve ourselves. So they start striking and saying, hey, we want better conditions. Now it's intriguing, one of the things that they strike for is a closed border. Why would they want a closed border?
Because they don't want anyone from Mexico coming in and taking their jobs.
Okay, because they're trying to get better wages, better conditions. If all someone has to do who owns a farm is say, okay, you guys go away and I'll bring in other people from Mexico, then they are never going to improve their situation. So the first thing they ask for is like, look, we don't want to have an open border. We want to make sure that we can have better conditions. One group decides that they're going to be like the Black Panthers, and they decide to call themselves the Brown Berets. They saw Che Guevara wearing a beret and they thought it looked cool, so they started going around and they said, we will take care of our own neighborhoods. These will be Hispanic neighborhoods. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of times Hispanic neighborhoods and black neighborhoods wind up fighting each other because they're like, we want people to recognize that we have the power and authority in this area. And so you will see groups of people and they say, this is a Hispanic neighborhood. We don't want the police here. We don't want white people here. We don't want black people here. Then the students actually say that the schools that we are going to are not good schools. They are not teaching us what we need. We want to be able to get a good education. So 22,000 students actually walk out of their campuses saying, we want to have better funded schools. We want to have better teachers who care about us. We want people who will help us to succeed and make us college ready, not just get us trained to go ahead and be workers like our parents, right? So for the Chicano movement, you have the strikes, you have people walking out, you have the Brown Berets. But one of the most effective ways that they win is the La Raza United Party. So what is the La Raza United Party? It's getting all the Hispanics together and to vote similarly. So La Raza United would be the United Race Party, right? And so what they're trying to do is say, we want to be able to vote together. Now, does that have an impact? Absolutely. When they have the United Race Party, they start voting in local representatives and they start voting in leadership at the county and state level. And all of a sudden, when the Democratic Party and the Republican Party see that there's a group of people who is going to take votes away from them, what do you think they do? All right, I don't want those people voting for those people, so I'm going to steal their ideas. I'm going to say, you know what? We'll do that same thing. Vote for us. There's a better chance we will win and we will implement some of those values for you. Don't vote for them. All right. Next group is the gay rights movement. So I think everybody realizes prior to the 60s, if you were gay, it was a mental illness, right? And you would actually go to the doctor to help fix being gay because it was a recognized mental illness. It was also illegal. But there was a group of people who said, no, we want the right to, be gay, to have sex with who we want to. They would meet at gay bars, primarily on the West Coast and the East Coast. And one of those bars is called Stonewall, right? So in Stonewall, you have all these people, and it's a gay bar, so you go and you drink and you meet people. The police know that it's illegal to be gay. So what do you think the police do?
Come in and shut it down.
They will come in and they will shut down these bars every once in a while. Now, normally, someone from the police department will give them a call and say, hey, the police are coming to raid you, and they'll tell everybody, and everybody disperses, and the police come in, and it's like, hey, okay, you guys, everything's fine here, right? But in 1969, the police notify him, hey, we're going to have a raid, and the people say, you know what? We are not going to let the police push us out of here, and so they stay. That day, the police come in, they arrest some employees for selling alcohol without a license, but they also arrest people for wearing less than 3 garments that are gender appropriate. Now, I don't know what that means for sure. I mean, there's some obvious perspectives here, but, just understand they were coming in and they were saying, this is gay bar, this is illegal, so they arrest the folks. The folks in the bar actually fight back with the police. And this is the beginning of the Gay Liberation Front. Over the next few years, they start fighting back against laws, and then in 1970 and 1971, they actually go and disrupt the American Psychological Association meetings, Psychiatric Association meetings. And in those meetings, they ensure that the psychiatrists cannot hold their conferences. They cannot do anything to move psychiatry forward. In 1971, the APA comes to them and says, all right, what is it going to take to get you to stop disrupting our conference? And they said, you need to declare that homosexuality is not a mental disease. And the psychiatrist said, done. We will go ahead and we will declare that homosexuality is not a mental disease. Just stop disrupting our meetings. So they are able to push the homosexual agenda by forcing the psychiatrist to declare it not a mental illness and to change the laws. All right. Last group, you have the Native Americans. The Native Americans are frustrated because they are not being treated well either, right? And they are seeing civil rights for other groups. So they start pushing. They actually occupy Wounded Knee because of the historical significance there. The FBI, the police are all surrounding. There is a lot of violence and people are injured and killed. They realize this is not working so well. What do the Native Americans have that the other groups don't have? Treaties. So they reach back and they say, you know what? Instead of fighting with the police, instead of fighting and having people killed or put into prison, we will go to the courts ourselves and we will take our treaties in. Does that work? Yes. So, what is the treaty, or what is the Supreme Court decision, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe last year, that impacted Oklahoma? Does anybody know? Anybody heard of McGirt?
That they're the ones that control Native Americans. The American government is not allowed to do that.
Okay, so McGirt says that the eastern third of Oklahoma was never declared not a reservation. And so the Supreme Court justices said, you know what? The portions of the state that were given to the Native American nations never were legally taken back from them. Therefore, they are still Native American reservations. Therefore, if you are a Native American person living in these areas, the state and the local governments, if they are not Native American, do not have the authority to arrest you or confine you. So, if you are, now the weird part is, if you are Native American, your Native American government system has to be the ones that arrest you. The weird part to me is, if you're a Native American victim, the state does not have the opportunity to try that trial either. So for that reason, we have had to increase significantly the number of FBI here, the number of U.S. Marshals here, and the FBI and U.S. Marshals have now worked with the state government to deputize a lot of the state and local leaders, police, so that they can move on. All right. So, who's the new left? So students who are pushing and saying, we don't believe the old left has done things that they need to do, so we are going to push, we are going to make things happen, and if we need to, we are going to push with violence, right? How do they influence the nation? A lot of turmoil, the 1968 elections, but they do accomplish many of the things they set out to do. What are the goals and accomplishments of the National Organization for Women? You guys already know that, right? All right, and how do Native American methods of changing their situation differ from other minorities?
Their treaties.
Treaties. They can go to court. Women are able to go to court, but not to the same degree, right? Because there's no treaties with women or Hispanics or blacks. All right. So, for next class, we are going to be talking about Nixon, and presumably everybody knows Nixon was the only president at this point who has left office. So, should be an interesting time. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Have a good, I think it's weekend, right? All right. About?
My quiz very early. I was in the training office, and so I was late this morning.
Okay.
I have the questions like written down, but I